Hello, this is Kimber Booth. Today in the Connector Life, we will discuss annual plans, mapping your year in 5 steps.
Welcome to the Connector Life with Kimber Booth, a blog of insights for connectors who are experts at connecting and uniting people, knowledge, and resources. And their success stems from bringing a level of energy and clarity for themselves and others.
Well, we are in a new year. Have you made a plan? If you did make a plan, are you on track with your plan? Well, I know in past years I have not been, but I am off to a good start. I've talked in the past about why New Year's resolutions don't work, so this is around the time of year that those tend to be failing. So let's regroup, get on back on track, reflect on your year so that you can have the greatest year ever. So I know you are a successful person since you're watching this vlog. Yet, I'm sure you still see people who are achieving more goals, seemingly, or they're more productive. And how do they do that? Well, my research and what I've read and learned and talked with experts is that the secret really is strategic planning of your goals and your time. You own your life, you own your time, you want to be strategic about how you spend it. And that does include balance, making sure you strategically spend time on the things you enjoy. I like to say that annual planning is a high performance habit that really allows you to lead a more intentional and successful life. So while I do strive to do this, I do not claim to be perfect by any means, and I try to stay on track as much as possible. But I try to execute on a plan much like the same plans I do at work in corporations that I've worked for, really being organized with it. So this year, when I went to do my strategic planning, it was a little different. Now that we're living in a new city, I took the time while we were driving back to New York to visit family. My husband was driving, I was not driving, to write down my goals during that trip. And I actually started using a new method. In the past, I have used Excel, and it was very standardized and organized, but maybe didn't feel like it flowed as much. So I started using a program called Microsoft Planner. Some of you may use programs like Trello or Kanban. It's very similar, but it just allows you to see your goals and your actions on a more visual board. So I really enjoy doing that, and please connect with me if you have any questions about my preference for these tools. So I do see when I think about how I plan my year, if I were to summarize it, I put it into 5 steps. First is goal brainstorming. Anytime you're looking to start something new, whether it's yourself or with a group, brainstorming new ideas is a great way to do it. Whether you use a mind map or you use just sticky notes or just free flow of information, you just want to brainstorm and get those ideas out. So we'll talk about that. The second is confirming your priority goals, because once you have that list, you want to narrow it down. You want to then write some SMART objectives so you're specific. Then write your action steps, and ultimately you need to get it into your calendar to make sure you execute on it. So I'm throwing out some terms here that people use differently, and I do like to use, objectives and things like that to help really frame it, again, from a strategic planning perspective. But I think the definitions of these can get a little confusing. So just to clarify what I think about this is, it's important to help you connect the dots from your mission and vision for your life to what your annual plan is, which is more of a short-term plan, if you will. And so ultimately, whether you're thinking about your career or your personal time, you want to have a vision. And your vision is like what you want to become. It's what your bold future looks like. Your mission is like, what is your purpose? What is your why? What do you do? Your values, of course, are an underlying support for this. And that is really what I want to be and what I believe in. So those are like some foundational groundwork that you want to have. And if you haven't explored those for yourself, for your personal life, I encourage you to do so. The next area, as we're getting into this planning, is your goals. And these are your goals that are going to help you achieve your mission and your vision. And again, they can be short-term and long-term. Ideally, you have both. You then write an objective, which is just kind of bringing it down another level to be more concrete and measurable in terms of milestones on your way to achieving a goal. The action steps then become your specific planned actions or tactics to achieve your objective. These can be grouped by strategies or sometimes a list of actions. And again, we'll talk about how you'll then get them into your calendar. It's also important to think about while you're writing your SMART objectives, it probably has some type of a measurable outcome. And having a metric in mind for how you're going to track those goals is important, and to document it, write it down. So thinking about that, let's walk through the 5 steps in a little more detail, and then I am going to be pretty vulnerable today and share with you what my goals are for this year. So the 5 steps are mentioned. Number 1 is goal brainstorming. So you really want to think and have in front of you what are your mission, your vision, and your values. And any long-term goals that you've written in the past. You want to have that all together when you're going to write your annual plan. You then want to look at what are your short-term goals for that year that may already be specified or new ones that you have to brainstorm. If you don't have long-term goals, now is also the time to consider that. You want to think about what are your goals for 3 and 10 years from now so that you can be working on steps or pieces or small bits of that. So consider that. Of course, with certain parts of my plan, just like when I'm at the work and working on a strategic plan for my corporation, when I think about my career in a whole, I do like to bring in external information. So I look at forecasts, trends, do a SWOT analysis of my strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats to help me decide what I'm going to plan. You can do the SWOT analysis for your personal life too. That could be a way to find some goals for your community, for your family, for your friends, etc. So after you've done all the brainstorming, that's great. Get it all out there. But we can't commit to all of it. You want to pick 2 or 3 goals per area of your life. And you may have heard me talk before. The areas of my life that I think about are my family and friends, myself, my career, and my community. So when I think about it in those ways, I try to pick 2 to 3 goals per area. Usually 1 is a long-term goal, and that's how I group mine together. And again, I'll share those with you in a little bit. So I think it's important when you're doing all of this, hopefully you really have, with your goal planning and brainstorming, identified some bold, big goals. My word of the year for this year is bold. So when I like to think about that, sometimes people pick 3 words. My word of this year is bold. And when it comes to planning your goals, I definitely think being bold and dreaming big is a great idea. So as I mentioned, the next step, again, if we're thinking about this from a real kind of strategic perspective, you want to write some objectives. So while you have that big goal idea, you want to take it down to the next level. So one of the examples I'm going to be talking about is in the community perspective. I want to be a successful volunteer giving back to the community. So what does that really mean? I want to come up with some specific goals of saying I will be a leader in this area, volunteering my time. So it's important to do that and have a specific timing. It may be within a quarter, it may be within the year, whatever you think is appropriate. Because when you think about writing SMART objectives, I'm sure you all know what it is specific, it is measurable, it's attainable, it is relevant and realistic, and it is time bound. So you want to think about that as you're writing your objectives for your annual plan. And again, consider doing it in the details of the goals you prioritized. Consider writing which of the quarters that you're going to work on your plans. Thank you very much. And you want to prioritize those. It's when you're thinking about what quarters, again, when you don't want to have more than 2 to 3 goals per area, you probably don't want to have a big focus on more than 2 to 3 goals per quarter. You can have more depending on the depth of those goals, but try to break them up and group them together in a way that makes sense and flows throughout the year for you. The next step is writing your action steps. So nothing will get done unless you consider what those action steps are. I know, and of course, one of my goals is to get physically fit again. And that is important, though, to have individual action steps to get me there, because I'm not going to wake up and lose 20 pounds in 3 months without taking some specific action steps. So again, you're going to want to take those strategies and your action steps together for each of your goals and identify them. And at this point, you probably want to be even thinking about what week you would do them in. In the blog post on my website at kimberbooth.com/blog/008, where you may be watching this, you will find that there's a download template for you to start filling this out and thinking about what weeks those action steps are going to happen. For example, one of my action steps for my specific weight loss goal is to be prepared to run in a 5K, which is coming up in May, and I need to put in the rest of the action steps that will lead up to that so that I'm ready for that. So the fifth step, which is probably the most important, and I'm not going to go into all the details of it, but the key with your execution is getting it into your calendar. So while I do use the Microsoft Planner this year, that still doesn't necessarily get every single task into my calendar. So you want to get the individual action steps into your calendar by week and then ultimately by day. So you don't have to put the whole year in there. You'll do that a month and a week at a time, but you want to start again from what we've talked about with your big goals, those objectives, and those being phased in by the quarter, and the objectives being phased in terms of the action steps by the specific week. Then when you do your weekly planning, I do mine on Fridays at the end of the day, because I like to plan for my upcoming week ahead of time and finish out the week that I just completed for doing some reflection. And when I do that, that's when I make sure that my goals for that specific week, those action steps, are in my calendar. They're either scheduled in certain time blocks or assigned to certain days for tasks that I need to get done. So keep that in mind. I would love to hear what your method is for doing that. I know a lot of people like written journals. Admittedly, I like OneNote to do some of my notes, and then I definitely use more of the Microsoft calendaring functions to keep track of my day and shared calendars with my spouse. So some tips to keep you from getting stuck. I know it seems like a lot, and if you want to worry about planning your whole year, some people do plan in a quarter at a time. I just read the 12-week year, which I thought was a great book. I haven't quite converted to all of their methods, but I do try to have these quarterly goals to kind of keep me focused, keep the momentum going so that I celebrate the successes a little more often than waiting until the end of the year. So some mistakes where people get stuck is they don't consider all the areas of your life in your plan. I know years ago, all I would plan for really was my work, my day job. That was my focus, and that's where I was really strategic about what I was going to do and what I was going to get done. So now that I think about it more broadly in those 4 areas, I feel much more balanced, and I really enjoy it. I really do think about work-life integration as much as possible. So that's why when I show those 4 areas of my life, I always show them like in an event diagram. And I score myself. I talked about that in my last blog post about the importance of reflection, and I score myself in these areas. And I probably will plan to put more attention to areas where I'm scoring myself lower, and try not to run away from the fact that I'm not scoring so well. So when I do that scoring, it does help me to prioritize those areas. So then when it comes to writing your objectives, a great tip that I learned is writing them like in a positive perspective. So when I wrote a goal, to be out of debt, I talk more in the positive aspect of it, like how much am I going to pay down, not like how much do I have left. And then when you think about it, you also want to write it like in the past tense. So if you say, I have achieved something, or I am physically fit is one of my goals, which is measured by my specific quarterly objectives, you want to write it in the past tense as if it has already happened. The next tip, which I've already mentioned a few times, is to write down or type your goals out. It really doesn't matter what format. So it's important though that they are in a central place that you can refer to as you're going through your year and doing your monthly and weekly planning. So in the download again with this week's blog, I do have some examples of how this looks like in Trello or Microsoft Planner, as well as a project plan template, more like an Excel or table that you could use that has these sections. You can add the weeks, etc. So when you get to step 5, again, one of the biggest tips I recommend is making sure you do get this stuff in your calendar. It's definitely nice to have a centralized list, but it's important to get it into your calendar, whatever planning system you use. Again, a hard copy planner, electronic calendar, etc. And then ultimately, you need to hold yourself accountable for your plan. It is up to you. I do find that sharing it with others, which I am about to do, is helpful. If you have a friend, a partner, a group of people who are watching your blog, that is one way to try and hold yourself accountable. So, speaking of this accountability, let me be vulnerable and share some of my 2019 goals with you. These are some of my prioritized short and long-term goals for the year. I don't have all the details in here, but these are my high-level goals for each of my 4 areas of my life and a brief objective for them. So for me, myself, is usually where I try to start my plan. It is to prioritize me and my health. And my objective there is that I will be physically fit as measured by my quarterly targets. From a finance perspective, my goal is to increase my revenue and reduce my debt. And my goal there, my objective is to have 20% less debt. Myself, I usually like to have a balanced goal and to say that I'm going to have time for all areas. And for me, that's more of an overarching goal. Like, am I successful with all of my areas? But I definitely have added that I am not stressed and I have time for all the areas. So that's important, and that will be measured by some of my sleep goals, etc. Then finance from a long term is I will have 0 debt. And in my specific action plans, I have certain years of targets to get me there within a time frame. Next, I usually go to family and friends. So with family and friends, it's important when it comes to family time to improve my quality time. And my objective there is that I will have close relationships with my kids. An important role I have, because I do follow the Franklin Covey method of roles, and I still go back to that and make sure I think about my different roles, and definitely being a mother, being a wife, being a sister, being a daughter are all very important to me, but I do call out being a wife separately. Sometimes we don't prioritize our spouses, and I want to make sure that my objective there is that I will have a closer relationship and open communication. Friendships are important, and my goal there is to build friendships. And I am in a new city, and while I am still very close with many of my friends in other cities, I don't see them as often. So my objective there is that I will have 5 close friends who I connect with at least twice per month, and some of those will be here in my new city of Cincinnati that I'm building friendships with. My family long-term goal is that we will have strong family bonds. In my career, my goal is to obtain a vice president position, and my objective is that I will be a VP within a year. From a development perspective, I want to be a certified coach and gain 2 new skills. For my business, which is the Kimber Booth Group, I will have a successful business, and I want to have 30 students across my courses and $10,000 in profit. From a recognition standpoint, from a career, I do want to be recognized by a national organization, and my objective there is that I will be recognized at the national level. My long-term career goal, really putting this out here, is that over the longer-term planning, I will work fully in my own business. And I'm really enjoying this. I'm really enjoying helping other people, sharing what I've learned across my career and some of the successes I've had with adding more resources at work, supporting and helping others grow. So again, putting that out there. The last area, and it's last but not least, it's really just as important for me, but for me to feel balanced and to give back as a professional with skills to the community. So my first goal there is that as a community volunteer, I will be on a local and a national board. So my objectives is that I have volunteered for a local community organization that has a national reach. So I have been involved with different organizations, but I'm really trying to find the right one that, again, combines some of my other passions. So I'm really looking to find what that might be. Some kind of organization that specifically helps people, some type of a needy group, teens, women, etc. So if you have ideas, I'd love to hear them. I have been involved very much with pharmacy organizations, so I do have a specific goal for pharmacy organizations, that I am a volunteer leader in state and national pharmacy organizations. I also have been involved with trail organizations, so I do list that I will have volunteered with my family to build multi-use trails. So that, again, to me is how I meld and have an integrated plan to make sure that I'm getting my kids, my husband involved with volunteering in an area that I enjoy, which is helping to build multi-use trails. If you're not familiar with those are like, I got involved with them because I used to love to rollerblade, and there wasn't necessarily a trail near my house, and I'm lucky that there's a lot of trails near me, but they need maintenance and they're still always trying to connect them. So you can bike on them, you can walk, use strollers, etc. But that has been a passion of mine. And finally, my long-term community goal is tied to the others, and that is I will support community development and be a national pharmacy leader. So those are my long-term goals. So again, those are high-level objectives. I do want to give you an example maybe of some action steps, because again, those were just high-level objectives. So let me take the example of my goal related to being with national pharmacy organizations. So my action steps there are that, one, I'm going to maintain my current position where I do serve on our state pharmacy association board. So that is going to take me over the whole year. That's an ongoing action. I'm also going to apply for the American Society of Health System Pharmacists delegate position, which happened actually already at the beginning of the year, and that actually has worked out great because I was elected to serve to represent the state. So I'm sharing that positive win. So I was happy to reflect on that for January. So my last step there for this year is to apply for a national committee with the American Society of Health System Pharmacists. So while I've been involved, I have not been at that level. So my goal is to do that a little bit later in the year, towards Q4, when they are doing their calls for elections. So again, those are some of my action steps of how I'm going to reach that objective. So I hope you've enjoyed this and have had a chance to reflect. Again, if you have more questions, please reach out to me or share your successes. Everybody would love to learn from you. Please join the ongoing conversation at kimberbooth.com. Subscribe to my email list so that we can connect regularly and I can share with you information that I don't share anywhere else. As I mentioned in this week's blog post at kimberbooth.com/blog/008, you will also be able to access my bonus blog download, which is an annual plan template. So you can download that, fill it out, write on the plan, and map your year. So now it's your turn. Go ahead, identify your goals, share them in the comments below at kimberbooth.com/blog/008. Be bold, be a connector, and excel in all areas of your life. Invest in your development. Thank you.